on the Brown Bears Sports Network from Learfield IMG College. Welcome to the Brown Bears Podcast. Now, here's your host, Scott Cordisci.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our Brown Bears Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Cordisci. Glad you could join us. The Brown Bears Podcast brought to you each week by Site Specific, a Rhode Island-based construction manager and general contractor. As a company, they value respect, trust, responsibility, humor, empathy, and excellence. And a reminder, you can hear the Brown Bears Podcast each and every week. We release new ones on Friday, and you can hear them everywhere on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. This week, it gives us great pleasure to welcome to the Brown Bears Podcast. I think a lot of our listeners will know this guy. He is a professor emeritus of engineering now at Brown University. He's been here for quite some time. Professor Barrett Hazeltine is with us. Barrett, how are you?
Okay. Thank you, Scott, for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you for being with us, Barrett. I'm sure you realize this, but you're a humble guy. You have impacted so many lives of young men and women at Brown University in all of your years here. And that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because look, I've been involved with Brown Athletics since 1994. And believe me, if I've heard your name once, I've heard it 1,000 times, because I just think our students at Brown have so much respect for you and enjoy taking your classes. How many years, Barrett, have you been teaching at Brown, and how did you wind up here in the first place?
I came to Brown in September of 1959, and I usually add to that before you were born, because it was before most of the listeners were born. And two stories that sort of worked out talk about how I came to Brown. I was a graduate student at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and was looking at a couple of schools in the East. Went in and talked to a assistant dean at Michigan, and we were having a nice conversation, and all of a sudden he looked up and said, this is silly. You go to Brown, because in the academic world, you can only go down, and so you better start at Brown. And another story related, I interviewed with a couple of deans actually in Ann Arbor. They were in town for meeting, and talked to one from another school that I won't mention. And at the end of the interview went well. And he said, if you come to work for us, you really got to develop a hobby, because those long winter nights can be very boring. And then a couple of days later, I interviewed with the dean at Brown. And again, I thought the interview went well. And again, he looked at me and says, an assistant professor has got to work as hard as he can and as long as he can, because those first couple of years is really going to establish your career. So I went home and thought about it for a few minutes and decided Brown was the place for me.
All right. More importantly, what's kept you at Brown all these years?
No, I think it's the students who we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But I think Brown students are just about as most interesting and engaged and exciting students that there are anywhere. The other thing is that I really like the east side of Providence. I like being close to the athletic facilities. I like being close to my office and all those things. I think Brown is a great place to be. Every other institution would be a step down for me, professionally or personally.
You said you love how everything's so close. That allows you to ride your bike everywhere, right?
Yeah, still.
So Barrett, you've taught all over the world, in different parts of Africa, in the Philippines, Taiwan, Thailand, etc. What were some of those experiences like for you, and what did you learn from those experiences teaching internationally?
Well, my serious teaching overseas was in Southern Africa, Zambia, Malawi, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. And you asked what it was like, and all I can say, my wife and I often use a line from The Wizard of Oz. Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. Life was different. Well, on the one hand, the students were serious, and I think they were serious because their alternative to being in the university was a little grim. and people were really terribly plagued. We were in an apartment, faculty housing for a month or so. Came in January, and February came around, and one group brought us a cake, and another brought some roses, and just people went out of their way to be nice. Uh, of course, not all things we take for granted existed. TV really wasn't available, uh, and you fixed your own car and all that. But I think I learned to be a little more independent and worry more about myself. On a couple of trips, our children were there, and not having TV and not having a lot of distractions, we actually sat around the supper table and talked for a long time. So life was good. Of course, you had to adjust.
It's funny to hear you say that, because that seems like a lost art to a certain extent today. I mean, I have two kids, and I value those moments when we're sitting at the dinner table together and talking about how everybody's day went, because this one's going here, this one has a baseball practice, that one's off to lacrosse, and they're so busy and we're so busy with our lives. It's kind of nice sometimes to live that simpler form of life, isn't it?
It really was.
So Engine 9, as it is called, I've heard so much about this, and it's certainly been one of the most popular classes here at Brown for many years now. Can you explain to everybody listening, what is that course all about, and why do you believe it's been so well received?
Well, I think one reason it's well received is we use business cases, that we don't stand up in front of the students and tell them things. We ask them, what would you do if you were the protagonist in the case? A typical question: should Tom First and Tom Scott sell Nantucket nectars? Another question would be, how should Dan Azis, who was active in the rowing program at Brown, how should he grow his business? And so the students can identify with these people, and they can identify with the problems involved. And I think it gives them a chance to try on a career and try on their own mental abilities and interests, and see how it fits.
When I hear you bring up the names of former Brown students that have gone on to have great success, and there are so many, and so many that have taken your classes, that has to make you proud. And I say that because, for many years I worked with our former football coach, Phil Estes. And, Phil used to say, as much as I love winning football games and competing for Ivy championships with these young men, what makes me most proud is seeing what they do after they get out of Brown and they become great husbands and great fathers and successful businessmen. And that's what really, I think, drove him every day. And I would imagine the same holds true for you, right? When you see.
Absolutely, yes. And it's striking that when you talk to people who are 10, 15 years out, people who played sports, we never talk about this game or that game. We talk about people and experiences. And just got an email from John Heffers, who played football for a while. And what he want to talk about is his 3 children and his job.
That's terrific. I've talked to many of your former students, and two of the things that are often said about you is the fact that when they had your class, that you were a professor that encouraged them, showed a belief in them and their ideas, and that you did it with a tremendous amount of compassion. I mean, when you hear your students, your former students, say stuff like that, how does that make you feel?
Oh, it makes me feel great. It makes me feel a little embarrassed, of course. And you know about the imposter syndrome. It makes me feel that they're talking about somebody else and not about me.
You're a
But
humble.
but it is very gratifying, and what you said earlier, I think is very important. It's gratifying, not that people necessarily are making a lot of money, but they're doing useful things, and they care about doing useful things. They care about other people.
Yeah, and two of those such former students that I allude to, George Pine, class of '89. I think his son and his daughter both TA'd for you when they were here at Brown. Tyler Wolfram, class of '88. To the point where those two men, they decided to have the new football team locker room named after you. What did that mean to you? And two of your students say, hey, we'd like to name the football locker room in your honor because you made that much of an impact on our lives.
Well, again, it obviously makes me feel humble and, very, very gratified. It also makes me feel proud of Brown that they're willing to recognize a faculty member, a professor, that something important in their lives was academics. Yeah.
So one thing
I think you know what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you too, Barrett, was I've read in other articles that maybe in your earlier years at Brown, your decision to teach business and entrepreneurship was let's say not so well received by some in the Brown community. Was that the case? And how did you do?
No, it really was, and I think really was distrust of practical matters, a feeling that actually making money or doing social good was not really the right thing for educated people to do. That education should be esoteric and far removed from the workplace. And I think that's just absolutely wrong. And I think students want very much something that they can identify with or something they want to do. And this ivory tower attitude that pure learning is better is simply not true.
Yeah, it's funny to hear you say that because it kind of goes along what I've said for many years. I wonder why more high schools don't teach, for instance, a real life math skills class where they teach you about taking out a home mortgage and they teach you about interest rates and they teach you about, 401ks and IRAs and, things that you're really going to have to deal with in life once you get out of high school and college. You wonder why. And that to me is kind of what you've done with your teaching in large part is you bring real world and real life examples into the classroom for them to debate, correct?
Yeah, and I think people learn much better from cases than they do from disassociated theory, that they want something that they can connect to.
Someone else who speaks very highly of you, he was a great basketball player here at Brown, Rick Landau, class of '68. Now, he was hired back in the 90s, and I don't know what they called him, if it was an adjunct professor or whatever the title was, visiting professor. And he remembers, like you, maybe in your early years, taking some criticism from his peers for the course that he was teaching. But he also remembers your words of encouragement. He said, while he had it coming at him from all angles, you were the guy that propped him up and said, look, stick to what you're doing. You're doing something good here and stick to it. And that meant a lot to him. To this day, he remembers you giving him those words of encouragement. Do you remember that?
I'm afraid I don't. You sort of hinted to me earlier about that conversation, and I'm afraid I don't remember. But I think everything you said about it is absolutely true. That I think I don't know how to say this nicely. He was a little bit looked down upon because he actually had accomplished something in the business world, and the economics professors didn't consider that as important as writing another paper. And I hope I told Rick, don't pay attention to them. The important thing is what we do for the students and what we do for their lives.
Well, I've also read that when a student chooses to participate by speaking in your class, and these are, of course, pre-COVID times when you were teaching in person, that one of the things you try to do is make it a point to shake their hand. Why is that?
Well, I think there's sort of two answers. One answer, and this is pretty pretentious, is that I think shaking hands indicates that, in fact, we, myself and the students are together in this educational process, that we're trying to solve this problem. It's not uh, the instructor telling them what the answer is, it's the student and myself working out what makes sense. Uh, And I mean, another answer is I think one time I did shake hands with a student and found out that other students seemed to like it. And I think it's important for a lecturer to get away from the front of the room and the lectern and go out and face the students. Don't be afraid, be out there.
Sure, sure. Be relatable. You've been here for now over 60 years. What are some of the things that you like most about Brown?
Oh, it's the students. Uh, and uh, I, what's appealing about the students? I think the appealing thing about the students, on the one hand, is that they're actually engaged, that they really are trying to get something useful out of this experience. And I think another thing, of course, is that they have an incredible range of backgrounds and stories and have done, really very exciting things. Uh, but on the other hand, uh, I think what Brown has kept all these years is a culture of caring and respect for one another, and a willingness to be helpful and concerned. And you read about other schools, and I talk to people who teach at other schools, and the students are fighting against each other, and sort of zero sum game. If I help her, then she's going to get a better grade, and if she gets a better grade, then I'm not going to get into medical school. And I don't see any of that at Brown. All I see are students trying to work together and to support each other. And I think it's makes a really congenial uh, place to be.
That's great. You've been here for over 60 years. How have things changed here at Brown in the last 6 decades?
Well, certainly they've changed a lot. And uh, see, the trouble with a question like that is it sort of implies that people who were students here 50 years ago weren't quite as strong as the students that are here now. And so I don't want to sound that way at all. Uh, I think we are getting a much wider range of students, places from coming from lots of different places. Uh, I think Brown in the last 30 or 40 years has really embraced being distinctive. That when I came to Brown, it wasn't quite clear what the major advantage of studying at Brown was. And now I think people are realizing that you come here because you're going to have some autonomy, you're going to get a chance to do lots of things, and you can choose what kinds of things you want to take. Uh, and I can't help but say that another major change has been the athletic facilities at Brown. The sports, sorry, the swimming pool, the fields, the hockey rink are first rate, and it wasn't always that way. I, I think the athletic coaches we had have always been strong, but now finally they have fields, buildings, and facilities that match their strengths.
I'm sure you remember going down to the old Marvel gym and watching the basketball teams play, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it was fun, but it was like being in a museum and all that. But we had a basketball coach, Stan Ward, that also coached baseball, and you would see him out there in the field, raking out the infield, and it really was full of pebbles. And there was one corner of the soccer field that when it rained, it was underwater. You probably remember that.
Yep, absolutely. Um, You know, I asked you about riding your bike around the East Side. Are you still riding your bike around these days?
Yeah, I did, and I can't help but saying that the question is similar to asking if the Pope was Catholic. Uh,
Barrett, if students can take one thing from your class, what would you want them to take away from it?
I want them to come away with a feeling that they can change the world, and I want them to have not only have the feeling that they have the ability to change the world, but they have the motivation and determination to actually do it.
I'm sure over your illustrious career, you have a lot of moments that stand out as highlights. Is there any particular moment or moments over your amazing career that stand out to you as just fond memories that when you think about them, they bring a smile to your face?
Well, it's again, you ask hard questions. It's a hard question because uh, when you say one thing, then you're going to not say something about somebody else, and I feel bad. Uh, let's see. In terms of athletic uh, uh, contests, clearly, well, clearly something is in the top of the memory is the lacrosse team beating Virginia at the last formal sports event we had at Brown,
Yep.
and I thought that was just great. Uh, I
Were you at Brown Stadium for the Harvard night football game, the first ever night
Yeah,
game?
that's right. I was going to put that down too. Uh, but then the rest of them are all sort of small things, and I think a succession of small things are really what makes an institution great. One of them was coming into the lab one night late, and I found a student in there, actually a student athlete, who was, sorry about that phone, who was working in the question, what are you doing here? This piece of test equipment is not working, and I'm going to make it work. And I think that's sort of typifies Brown, that the students are owners of our institution. They're the ones that really feel that the success of Brown depends upon the student. This is not a chore to get through. This is our place.
I was going to ask you because, again, every Brown student or former student of yours that I've talked to talks about just your uncanny ability to connect with the Brown students. And I was going to ask you why you think that is. But look, from what I know about you, and I've known you for quite a few years now, and from everything I've been able to ascertain and talking to students that have had your classes in its simplest form, you're someone who lives by the golden rule, right? I mean, treat others as you want to be treated yourself. And that's really not hard to do, is it? And I wish we all could do that. I wish I myself could do a better job of it. But I feel like that might be the key to your connection with all your students.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also, and I say being comfortable in your own skin, that I really feel very proud to be at Brown. And I think that pride has meant that I don't feel that I have to prove to students or to anybody else that I'm okay. Just because I do have this job at Brown University, I don't have to show people that I'm special. Uh, I'm sure. Am I making sense at all?
Yeah, no, you're like I said, your humility is one of your great qualities, and I mean that. Um, on Saturday, the Kentucky Derby will be run, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Among the many,
6 Brown guys, no 4.
yeah, five former Brown football players.
5, yeah, right.
I mean, but again, it goes back to what you talk about, how this place brings people together, because these 5 guys wanted a way to stay connected. And so one of them his family has a history in horse racing. So they decided to, buy a horse, see how it goes. And the first 2 horses they bought weren't successful at all.
Yeah.
And so this third one, they said, okay, one last shot and this is it. And here their horse is one of the favorites to win the Kentucky Derby on Saturday.
Yeah, no, it's just exactly a Brown story that they kept together. And when you read the newspaper articles, they're not talking about how much money they're going to win, and they're not talking about the glory. They're talking about how much fun they're having, and what they're trying to do to be good to each other and to set an example for the rest of the world.
Yeah. And just like when the pandemic started, Barrett, over a year ago, we had some student athletes that created an organization that was taking unused food from farmers that was otherwise going to rot and be buried. And they repurposed that and got it donated to food banks to help feed people that needed it. And again, that's so Brown that our students would think of something like that. Hey, instead of this food going to waste, let's see if we can put this to good use.
Yeah, and I think that's really the strength of Brown, that the students thought about it themselves and they brought it out and did it on their own. That they didn't have somebody take over the project and let them just carry it out. They planned and did it all themselves. And I think that comes up in an earlier point. Why is Brown an appealing place to work? And I think it is an appealing place to work because people give you autonomy. They give you space to do things. And we're clearly under administered, at other institutions I won't name, there'll be 5 people that do the job that you do. And so that means, Scott Cordishi's got to work very hard, but at least you get the opportunity to be autonomous and creative, and I think it's the same for the student. They get a chance really to try things out, and that's really what undergraduate education seems to me is about. Find out who you are, find out what you really want to do. Don't have to listen to somebody else. This is you.
Yep, and you're a big part of encouraging them to do just that. Barrett, I can't thank you enough for joining us on the Brown Bears podcast. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to listen to this one because they want to hear from you. Thanks so much. And
well, thank you, Scott, for asking me. It's really an honor to be part of this program, the podcast program, of course.
Professor Emeritus of Engineering Barrett Hazeltine, our guest on this week's edition of the Brown Bears podcast.
You've been listening to the Brown Bears podcast on the Brown Bears Sports Network. For more information on Brown University athletics, visit brownbears.com.